Welcome to the weekly rundown. Let's get to the receivers. London, you mentioned in the first half of our weekly rundown that you like Peyton Manning this week, and I'm going to stick with that theme. I'm going Emmanuel Sanders, who I know Peyton Manning has been awful, but he finds a way to get the ball into Emmanuel Sanders' hands. I mean, Sanders has caught at least six passes in 4 of 7 games, and one of those was one where he went 4 for 109 and a touchdown. So he's actually been surprisingly consistent, and I think Vontae Davis likely focuses on Demaryius Thomas, which gives Emmanuel Sanders a very beatable matchup. So I think, he racks up the receptions and maybe even finds the end zone in a game where they may dominate, the time of possession because the defense has been kind of stout, and Andrew Luck's kind of in a transition phase. And the other one I like, you mentioned Ben Roethlisberger. Antonio Brown. I mean, he's basically the number one wide receiver in football. We've seen it before when Big Ben is there. He eclipsed 100 receiving yards for the first time since week 3 last week. He's going to see the targets. There's nothing scary about the matchup. And we mentioned, about the Falcons offense, about the Steelers offense. They're so concentrated. They've got their back and they've got their number one receiver, and that's who they feed every single week. They're predictable. So I like knowing that. Who do you like at receiver?
I like my man down in Tampa Bay, Mike Evans. Going against the New York Giants, man. that pass defense. I mentioned Doug Martin as far as liking him at the running back position, but I also like Mike Evans at the wide receiver position. I probably should have picked Jameis Winston to go along with that as well, make it a trifecta. But you look at the New York Giants defense, 32nd ranked in the National Football League. They get a lot of takeaways, but man, you saw and witnessed Drew Brees throw for seven touchdowns against them. Put up a half a hundred or half a hundon, however you want to call it. I like Mike Evans. He's definitely a favorite target down there for Jameis Winston going against the New York Giants. Another guy I like is Amari Cooper. The rookie wide receiver. Though he didn't have a big game against the Jets and Revis Island, not many people do. This time he gets a Pittsburgh defense that's nowhere near the caliber talent as far as the Jets secondary, although they were pretty bad other than Revis last week. I like Amari Cooper in this matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They don't have a true guy that they can say I'm gonna line him up and shut Cooper down. So I like him at the wide receiver position as well.
Yeah, and Mike Evans could benefit from the continued absence, I should say, of Vincent Jackson, because then he'll continue to just rack up the targets. And while it might not be efficient, he'll certainly haul some in. Let's move on to tight ends. I'm going Martellus Bennett this week. I know Brandon Flowers is supposed to be active and will likely cover Alshon Jeffrey, which could open up a larger role for Bennett. But again, this Bears passing offense without Kevin White, losing Brandon Marshall, it's really, and now we've lost Forte. So you've even got that screen game going. It's going to be Bennett and it's going to be Jeffrey. And with Jeffrey having a tough matchup, San Diego's given up the third greatest percentage above average production, according to Football Outsiders. Wow, that's a mouthful. But so basically, they've allowed efficient production to the tight end position, and I think Martellus Bennett, who led the NFL in receptions for tight ends last year, I mean, you got to like that. So who do you like at the tight end?
I'm gonna go Jordan Reed in Washington. You look at what he did since he's come back and he was healthy. 2 weeks ago against Tampa Bay. He is a matchup nightmare. I don't think people realize how good of a route runner he is. I played with him 1 year in Washington, and the kid he runs routes like a receiver. I know New England will focus on stopping. They tend to take away a lot of guys, but it's hard to take him away because he's a tight end. So he'll 1 minute he's lined up inside is he going against a linebacker. He'll flex outside and go against a safety or a cornerback, and he beats them all. And Kirk Cousins looks to get him the ball often. So I like him, and I also like Ben Watson. Going against the Tennessee Titans. He's averaging, I think, over 100 yards with the last 3 ball games, and he's become Breeze's new favorite target. And if you think about this, him and Jimmy Graham have similar stats. Think that, digest that for a second. He and Jimmy Graham have similar stats on the season. Both 38 catches. Watson actually averages a little bit more, about a yard more per catch, and I think he has one more touchdown. So Ben Watson, man, he's definitely on the uptrend at the tight end position.
Yeah, it's crazy because he's 35 years old. It's not like this is a young kid emerging. I mean, this is crazy. He's like a Julio Franco, where he's emerging in his old age. It's incredible.
I think is Julio Franco still playing baseball?
I actually think he still is
No, no,
overseas.
no. Listen to this. You'll love this. So I grew up in Cleveland. Julio Franco. I'm 40 years old. Julio Franco played for the Cleveland Indians when I was in elementary. So you're talking about the 80s.
Yep.
Julio Franco, I promise, was playing baseball last spring. So just to give you an example.
All right. Oh yes. Let's go to the defense first. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going Broncos defense this week. We already mentioned it in the first segment against Andrew Luck. They've got a horrific offensive line that isn't helping Andrew Luck out, and he seems to be getting pretty flustered pretty early in these games. I mean, we saw his first three quarters. I mean, DeMarcus Ware, Von Miller going to be right in his face. They only have an implied total of 20 points, which is extremely low, especially considering that, a lot considered Andrew Luck to be one of the best quarterbacks. So I'm going with the Broncos. Who do you like?
I mentioned the Jets and how they struggled against the Oakland Raiders last week. They were really embarrassed. I mean, they missed 19 tackles. 19 tackles. Didn't play with any passion or fire. I look at the New York Jets to bounce back in a game at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I know the Jaguars are an improving team. Their offense, they have some good wide receivers. But I look at the Jets to have a bounce back game because of the pride factor, and they were embarrassed with their performance against the Oakland Raiders. So I'm gonna go with the New York Jets in this one.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough for them to establish the run with Yeldon. That could be a miserable game for the Jaguars. Let's go to the questions as I was alluding to before. And you mentioned Jordan Reed. I was going to ask you a Twitter question, but I got one for you. So I was building my lineup, initially, and I didn't have much money left for my second flex spot. And Jordan Reed is extremely cheap this week on FantasyDraft. So in my cash lineup, I was going to go Martellus Bennett and Jordan Reed. What do you think of using two tight ends in a 50-50 or that type of format? Because, usually they produce the lowest output, but now we're talking about two guys who we both like. Do you think that's a legitimate strategy?
Well, I think we have to also look at the big picture. There are two tight ends, but for each team, Jordan Reed is really like the number 2 go-to receiver in Washington. He's receiving. He's a tight end by label only. The number of targets and scoring touchdowns and things like that. I would have to look at him in a different line. Then you look at Martellus Bennett. The matchup, man, it says play him. So I would be okay with you starting both those guys or playing them both in your lineup.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking this week, honestly, and I'm usually against that 100%. But let's get to our Twitter question from Josh3302. He asks, "What are your thoughts on Twitter eliminating the gold star favorite and exchanging it for a heart?" Have you seen this?
I did see that. Me personally, I like the gold star. I don't know why they went to the heart. I don't know, man. Sometimes you just got to leave well enough alone, and maybe in testing that people like the heart better, but I personally like the gold star. I'm sure we all like getting those gold stars when we're in elementary on our papers.
Yeah, exactly. And it just seems like they're going closer and closer to Facebook, and I kind of liked staying different because I was definitely a bigger fan of Twitter. You mentioned earlier something that I want to ask you a question about now, the narrative of Peyton Manning facing his old team. Last night in the NBA, I don't know if you saw it, Emmanuel Mudiay faced the Lakers, and Byron Scott, the coach of the Lakers, had previously said he's not a point guard. So after the game, Mudiay dropped a double-double. He said, that's for Byron Scott saying that I couldn't play point guard. So what do you make of A, facing your old team narratives, and B, just any type of narrative whatsoever? You've been wronged by a guy on the other team. Maybe you have a matchup against the quarterback. Do you think that these things exist and make you play harder?
Oh, they absolutely exist. Especially for the guys who have played for a long period of time, or even, in this case with Mudiay, he's a rookie, But he took this to heart where here you have an opposing coach saying, I can't play the point guard position, and we as athletes, we always look for some type of motivation. I know I did when I played. I would look for any type of motivation. If I saw, another team's jersey at our home stadium, or if I'm going into the parking lot or coming into the arena and I see tailgating with some other guy's jersey on, I used to get pissed. So, any little thing that you can use for motivation. As far as facing your old team, it depends on how you left there, but you definitely want to perform well against your previous team. You circle that date once the schedule comes out, and you're going to be facing your old team. So if there's one game that you really want to show up on, it's against a former team.
So you agree that Peyton Manning is going to be fired up to face the Colts his last time. And I think I agree with you. We both like the Denver offense. We didn't mention Ronnie Hillman, but I think I like him too. Until next time, I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher, and we are out.